She had always been quiet, the kind of girl who could sit in a corner for hours without drawing much attention. Her world was simple and filled with the gentle sounds of music she kept in her mind. At home, she would hum tunes softly while her fingers tapped on the table or the edge of a chair, imagining a piano beneath them. No one in her small town had ever thought much about her, and she liked it that way. It gave her space to dream and practice her music in her own little world. Every morning, she would walk to school with her small bag slung over her shoulder, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. The chatter of children, the barking of dogs, the distant rumble of vehicles. All these noises blended into a rhythm that she secretly loved. Her steps matched the beat of her own imagination. Music was everywhere for her, even in the ordinary things people ignored. She often wondered why others did not notice it, why they could not hear the harmony in the smallest details. School was always a mix of excitement and fear. She liked some parts of it, like reading stories and learning about different places, but she feared the moments when she was expected to stand out. She was careful to blend in, to avoid the attention of teachers who sometimes seemed to favor the louder, more confident students. There was one thing, however, that always made her heart beat faster: music class. That was where she felt alive, where she could be herself even if just for a few minutes. The piano in the corner of the classroom called to her every time she passed it, and her eyes would linger on its polished surface, imagining the sound she could make. Her teacher noticed her quiet nature and often gave her simple assignments, nothing too challenging. But music had its own rules, and she had learned them slowly, one note at a time. At home, she would practice on an old, slightly out-of-tune keyboard, her fingers learning the dance of scales and melodies. She had a natural feeling for the keys, a subtle touch that made each note gentle yet clear. It was not just practice, it was a connection. Every note she played was a piece of her, a reflection of her thoughts and emotions that she could not always put into words. Some teachers, however, did not see her potential. They saw only a quiet, unremarkable girl who rarely spoke up. One morning, a few teachers gathered quietly, observing her from a distance during music class. They whispered among themselves, curious about the rumors of her talent but skeptical of its truth. They decided that it would be interesting to test her, to see if she could really play or if it was just imagination and talk. Their plan was simple: make her perform without warning to catch her off guard. They expected hesitation, nervousness, perhaps even failure. The idea of her surprising them had never crossed their minds. She had no idea that this was coming. To her, it was just another day at school, another class to attend. She walked into the music room, her eyes immediately drawn to the piano. She felt a familiar thrill, a quiet excitement that she could not explain. The other students were there too, chatting and laughing, their energy filling the room. She moved to her usual spot, a bench near the piano, and opened her music notebook. Her fingers rested on the keys lightly, almost as if greeting old friends. Her heart raced a little when the teacher called everyone to attention. She glanced up, noticing the serious looks of a few teachers who seemed unusually focused on her. A shiver ran down her spine, but she told herself it was just nerves, nothing more. She was used to performing for herself at home, but never for an audience that doubted her. She could feel their expectations, the unspoken challenge in their eyes. They wanted her to falter, to show them that she was just a quiet girl with big dreams but little skill. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, reminding herself that music was her friend, her companion through lonely days and quiet nights. She imagined the notes before she touched them, each one forming in her mind like a small story waiting to be told. She let her fingers hover over the keys, feeling the cool surface, imagining the sound it would make. In that moment, she felt a calmness that surprised her, a quiet confidence that whispered she could do it. The teacher stepped forward, a subtle smile on their face, pretending to be encouraging but hiding a hint of challenge. "Play something for us?" they said softly, watching her carefully. The words were simple, almost casual, but she could sense the weight behind them. She nodded slightly, a small movement almost invisible to the casual observer. Then she placed her fingers on the keys, letting the moment stretch for just a breath. It felt like the whole world had stopped, waiting for what was to come. As her fingers pressed the keys for the first time, the room was filled with a sound that was gentle, clear, and unexpectedly perfect. It was a single note, but it carried more than just sound. It carried her emotions, her dreams, her quiet determination. The teachers froze, their whispers dying in their throats. The other students turned slowly, sensing something extraordinary in the air, but unsure what it was. The note lingered, almost glowing in the quiet room. A single drop of music that made everyone stop and listen. She had not planned it, not consciously. It was instinct, practice, and a connection to the music that flowed through her. The note was not loud or flashy, but it had a presence that filled the room. She felt a small thrill, a flicker of surprise at her own courage, her own skill. She had always known she loved music, but she had never realized how much power a single note could have when shared with others. It was as if the piano itself was breathing with her, responding to the quiet confidence she had carried in her heart all these years. The teachers looked at each other, trying to mask their astonishment, but it was impossible. Their test had failed in the most unexpected way. They had expected uncertainty, hesitation, maybe even embarrassment. Instead, they had been met with a moment of clarity and beauty, a proof of talent that could not be ignored. The girl's fingers hovered over the keys for another moment, sensing the room's attention, feeling the subtle shift in the energy around her. It was quiet, but it was powerful, a reminder that sometimes the most unassuming people carry the greatest gifts. She did not rush. She allowed the moment to breathe, letting the sound linger, knowing that this note was just the beginning. It was a small victory, not just against the teacher's doubts, but against her own fear and uncertainty. She realized in that instant that music was more than a hobby or a pastime. It was a part of her identity, something that could no longer be hidden away in corners or whispered to herself in solitude. She had touched the world, even if just a little, with her first note. As the sound faded, a hush remained. The teachers were speechless, caught between admiration and disbelief. The other students looked at her with wide eyes, some whispering excitedly, others simply staring in awe. She sat there for a moment longer, breathing softly, feeling the rhythm of her own heart mingling with the echo of the note. She smiled slightly, a small, private smile, knowing that she had surprised everyone, including herself. She had turned a simple test into a moment of triumph without even realizing it. The rest of the class continued around her, but the energy had changed. People were quieter, more thoughtful. Some looked at her with a new respect, some with curiosity, wondering what other surprises she might have hidden within her quiet demeanor. The girl herself felt lighter, freer, as if a weight she had carried unknowingly had been lifted. Music had always been her secret world, and now it had become a bridge to the world around her, a way to connect without words, without explanation. She left the piano with a small sense of accomplishment, knowing that this was only the first step. There would be more notes, more melodies, more moments to prove herself, but for now, she allowed herself to bask in the quiet triumph of her first note. It had shocked everyone, yes, but it had also revealed something far more important. The strength of belief in oneself, even when others doubt you. And in that realization, she found a courage that she had never known she possessed. The next morning, she woke up with a mixture of excitement and nerves. The first note she had played the day before still echoed in her mind. Not just the sound, but the feeling it had brought with it. It was strange to think that something so simple could carry so much weight, so much attention. She dressed quietly, choosing clothes that felt comfortable, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw extra eyes. She wanted to be herself, just a girl who loved music, not a performer yet, not someone everyone was waiting to see again. The walk to school felt different that day. The air seemed sharper, the sounds louder, as if the world itself had noticed her presence. Birds chirped, but she imagined they were clapping softly for her, joining in the rhythm of her heartbeat. The neighbors waved, and she smiled, though her thoughts were already at the music room. She wondered if her classmates had been talking about her first note, if the teachers were already whispering in corners. The anticipation made her stomach flutter, a nervous energy she was not used to feeling. When she entered the school, the usual hum of activity seemed charged. Conversations stopped briefly as she passed, though she could not tell if it was really because of her or just her imagination. She made her way to the classroom, her bag swinging lightly against her side. Inside, the piano sat in its usual corner, polished and silent, waiting. She took a deep breath, letting the familiar sight calm her. The memories of yesterday's moment of music filled her chest with warmth. It was comforting to know that the piano was there, steady and reliable. Her classmates were already settling in, some whispering and glancing toward her. She ignored them, focusing instead on the small notebook she always carried. It had sketches, notes, and tiny melodies she had written when inspiration struck. Music was her escape and her companion. Today she reminded herself it could be more than that. Perhaps it could speak for her, even to those who doubted her. Perhaps it could prove that talent did not always need loud voices or attention. The teachers, too, were watching. Their expressions were carefully controlled, though she could sense the curiosity and hidden challenge in their eyes. They had spoken quietly among themselves before class began, and she had caught snippets of their conversation. They wondered if she could repeat the success of the first note or if it had been a lucky chance. Their plan, subtle yet deliberate, was to test her under pressure, to see how she would perform with expectation weighing down on her. She did not know that, and it helped her keep calm. The lesson began as usual with basic exercises and scales. She played along quietly, letting her fingers move automatically over the familiar patterns. Each note was a reassurance, a reminder that she was capable. She watched the teachers from the corner of her eyes, sensing their eyes on her like gentle pressure, pushing her without words. It was uncomfortable at first, but then she remembered yesterday, remembered how it felt to let a note speak without fear. She smiled softly, a small secret between her and the piano. Midway through the class, one of the teachers spoke up, their tone casual but firm. "Why don't you play something for us today?" It was simple, almost routine, but she could tell it was not a normal request. She nodded, her throat tightening for a brief moment. It was the same feeling as yesterday, but stronger. This time, she knew it was intentional, a deliberate moment to see her reaction. Her heart beat faster, not with fear but with a growing sense of purpose. She had played for herself before, and yesterday had been a surprise even to her. Today she would play again, and she felt ready. She moved to the piano, her steps measured, each one connecting her mind to the moment. Her classmates turned to watch, curiosity and anticipation mixing with a quiet tension in the room. The teachers leaned slightly forward, their expressions neutral, waiting. She placed her hands on the keys and paused, letting her eyes drift over the familiar surface. It felt comforting, almost like shaking hands with an old friend. She imagined the notes before touching them, visualizing the flow of the melody. Her fingers hovered just above the keys, and for a moment, the room was completely still. Then she began. The notes came slowly at first, cautious and deliberate. Each one was precise, clear and deliberate. There was a quiet beauty in the way she connected them, a subtle rhythm that made the air itself feel lighter. The teacher's eyebrows lifted slightly, though they tried to hide their astonishment. The students watched in silence, some leaning closer, others holding their breath. She felt their attention like a weight, but instead of faltering, she let it guide her, each note stronger and more confident than the last. As she continued, the melody grew, flowing through the room like a gentle stream. It was not loud or dramatic, but it had a power that filled the space completely. The teachers exchanged glances, their previous skepticism fading. They had expected uncertainty, a stumble, something imperfect to prove their doubts correct. Instead, they were confronted with skill, emotion, and clarity. The notes carried not just sound, but feeling, a story told without words, a girl speaking through music more eloquently than anyone could through conversation. Her fingers moved gracefully, almost dancing over the keys, each note deliberate, each pause meaningful. She felt herself in a rhythm she could not describe, a connection between her mind, her heart, and the piano. The classroom became a stage, though it did not feel like one. She was not performing for anyone in particular. She was sharing a piece of herself. That was when she realized the truth. Talent was not about proving others wrong. It was about being true to oneself and letting the world hear, whether it was ready or not. The final note lingered in the air, soft and resonant. She let her fingers rest lightly on the keys, breathing deeply, feeling the quiet energy in the room. The teachers were speechless, caught between admiration and surprise. The other students stared, wide-eyed, whispering softly among themselves. Some were inspired, imagining what it would feel like to express themselves so fully. Others simply could not believe that such a quiet girl could hold such command over music. She felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. The fear she had felt before starting was gone, replaced by a quiet joy. She had faced another test, a deliberate challenge, and had met it with grace and confidence. She realized that the teacher's intentions, though meant to provoke doubt, had instead given her an opportunity to shine. It was strange, but she felt grateful for it. Without knowing it, they had helped her see her own strength. When she finally stepped away from the piano, the room remained quiet for a moment longer. Then, slowly, murmurs of admiration began to spread. Teachers nodded, some with subtle smiles, some with raised eyebrows of surprise. The students whispered excitedly, talking about her skill, her confidence, and the emotion she had conveyed. It was a moment of recognition, small but significant. She had not sought it, but it was inevitable. Her music had spoken louder than words ever could. As class ended, she packed her notebook and left the room, feeling lighter and more certain of herself. She walked through the hallways with a quiet pride, not arrogance, just a sense that she had discovered something important. Music was no longer just a private escape. It was a bridge between her inner world and the world around her. She understood now that she could face challenges, doubts, and tests with the same quiet determination she had brought to the piano. The world might be unpredictable, teachers might test her, and classmates might watch, but she had found her voice, her first true melody of courage and self-belief. The next day, the girl walked to school feeling a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. The memory of her previous performances floated in her mind like gentle waves, reminding her of the courage she had discovered in herself. She did not think about what the teachers expected or what her classmates might say. Instead, she focused on the piano waiting for her in the music room, imagining the notes as friends she had not yet introduced to the world. When she entered the classroom, the atmosphere felt different. The other students were more alert, glancing at her with curiosity and a hint of awe. The teachers, who had planned their secret test, were watching closely from their corners. Their eyes held skepticism and interest at the same time, waiting for her to stumble, waiting for the moment they could prove their point. She did not notice any of this at first. She had learned to ignore the whispering doubts of others and focus on the music that lived inside her. Today's lesson started as usual with scales and warm-ups. She followed along, letting her fingers glide across the keys, feeling the familiar rhythm of practice and memory. But beneath the surface of calm practice, something was stirring. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of expectation pressing down like an invisible hand. Yet, for the first time, she did not resist it. She let it exist and turned it into energy, a force that could guide her fingers rather than frighten them. It was a strange sensation, realizing that what once caused fear could now give her strength. Halfway through the class, one of the teachers cleared their throat, a subtle but deliberate signal. "Play something for us," they said, their voice smooth, neutral, almost like a challenge disguised as encouragement. She understood immediately that this was the test. It was not just a simple performance. It was an evaluation, a moment where her true skill would be revealed. She nodded gently, keeping her hands resting lightly on her lap for a few seconds, collecting herself. She closed her eyes for a brief moment and breathed slowly, reminding herself that she had faced similar moments before and had come through unshaken. She approached the piano with careful steps, feeling the polished wood under her fingertips. She could hear the quiet hum of the room, the shuffle of papers, the the whisper of voices, the faint tapping of shoes on the floor. All of it formed a backdrop for the music she was about to play. She let her hands hover over the keys, imagining the melody in her mind before she touched the first note. Then, slowly, deliberately, she pressed down. The first tone rang out, clear and resonant, filling the room with a sound that was unexpected in its strength and precision. The teachers exchanged glances, their plan already unraveling. They had anticipated hesitation, perhaps a falter or a note played incorrectly. Instead, the first sound captured the room like sunlight piercing through clouds. Even the students who had doubted her instinctively stopped talking. They could feel the music, and it demanded their attention. It was as if the piano itself was speaking, carrying not only the girl's skill but also the quiet determination she had cultivated for years. She continued, each note flowing into the next with confidence and emotion. The melody was not complicated, yet it held a subtle beauty that drew in everyone present. She did not rush or show off. She let the music take its natural course, allowing the room to listen and breathe with her. Every pause, every delicate touch of the keys, communicated more than words ever could. The energy in the room shifted, and even the teachers who had doubted her could not help but feel a sense of awe. Her classmates leaned forward, captivated. Some whispered softly to each other, amazed at the grace and clarity of the notes. Others sat silently, taking in the music with wide eyes and attentive ears. There was a quiet, collective admiration, a recognition that something special was happening right in front of them. The girl felt it too, a warm wave of connection between herself, the piano, and the audience. It was a profound moment, the kind that leaves a lasting mark on both the performer and the listeners. As the piece grew, she allowed herself to explore subtle variations, slight changes in tempo, gentle shifts in volume. She was no longer thinking about the test or the teacher's expectations. She was fully immersed in the music, letting her emotions guide her hands. Each note carried a piece of her story, a fragment of the quiet hours she had spent practicing, imagining, and dreaming. The room seemed to respond to her, the air vibrating with the resonance of the melody. Even the teachers could no longer hide their surprise. They had intended to test her confidence, yet what they found was a depth of talent that exceeded all their expectations. The final notes approached, and she played them with care and intention. The sound lingered in the room, soft but powerful, as if refusing to fade. She lifted her hands, letting them hover for a moment, and then rested them gently on her lap. Silence followed, filled with awe and disbelief. No one moved, no one spoke. The teacher's plan had completely failed. Instead of a hesitant performance, they had witnessed a display of skill, poise, and the quiet power of someone who had learned to believe in herself. Finally, a teacher broke the silence with a soft, appreciative sigh. The others nodded, some still recovering from their surprise. The students whispered excitedly among themselves, talking about the grace and precision they had witnessed. The girl remained seated for a few moments, feeling the lingering energy of the room. She had done more than play notes. She had shared a part of herself that no one could deny. The music had become a bridge between her inner world and everyone else, a silent declaration of confidence and skill. She walked away from the piano, her steps light and steady. She could feel the eyes on her, some full of admiration, others tinged with envy or disbelief. She paid little attention, letting the experience settle in her heart. The joy was quiet, not boastful, but it was real. She had faced a deliberate test designed to challenge her, and she had met it with courage, grace, and undeniable talent. It was a victory, not against anyone else, but against fear and doubt itself. Throughout the day, the memory of the performance stayed with her. Every time she closed her eyes, she could hear the notes echoing, reminding her of the quiet strength she had discovered. The teachers, who had intended to test her, now viewed her differently. They whispered among themselves, acknowledging her skill without needing to say it aloud. Her classmates, too, began to see her in a new light. She had become someone they could not ignore, someone whose quiet dedication had transformed into something remarkable. She did not seek attention or praise. but she realized that her music had spoken louder than words ever could. She had discovered the true power of her talent, and in doing so, she had learned something even more valuable: that confidence and perseverance could transform fear into strength. She understood that the path ahead might include more tests, more challenges, and more moments of doubt, but she felt ready. The piano had given her a voice, and now she knew she could use it with courage and grace. As the school day ended, she walked home with a light step, feeling the rhythm of her own heartbeat in harmony with the music she carried inside her. She knew that this was only the beginning, that there would be more opportunities to grow, more melodies to discover, and more moments to surprise those who doubted her. But for now, she allowed herself to bask in the quiet triumph of having faced the test and emerged not just unshaken, but stronger, more confident, and ready to embrace the journey ahead. After her remarkable performance, the classroom atmosphere had changed completely. What had started as a routine music lesson had turned into something memorable, something that no one present would forget. The teachers who had intended to challenge her now found themselves grappling with an unexpected truth. The quiet girl they had underestimated had revealed a talent that was both rare and impressive. They could not ignore it, no matter how much they had planned to test her. As the notes lingered in their minds, the students remained silent for a moment, absorbing the sound and the feeling it had created. Gradually, whispers began to spread, soft at first, then growing in excitement. "Did you hear that?" one student whispered, eyes wide. "I can't believe she played like that," said another. Some students exchanged glances, astonishment written all over their faces. The energy in the room had shifted from routine classroom chatter to awe-filled admiration. The girl herself felt a quiet satisfaction, but it was not about pride. It was about understanding that she had connected with something larger than herself, a moment of true expression. The teachers, too, were affected. They had expected a falter, a hesitant note, or perhaps an uncertain performance that would confirm their doubts. Instead, they found themselves facing the reality of skill and poise they had not anticipated. They whispered among themselves, discussing quietly what had just happened. "I didn't think she had it in her," one said, shaking their heads slightly. "Neither did I," replied another. Their words were tinged with surprise, and though they tried to maintain their professional composure, it was clear that they had underestimated her. The test they had designed had unintentionally revealed the depth of her abilities, and there was nothing they could do but acknowledge it. Some students approached her cautiously, curiosity and respect mixing in their eyes. "That was amazing," said one quietly. "How did you do that?" She looked up from her notebook, her eyes meeting theirs briefly. She smiled gently, a soft, quiet smile, not boastful but filled with warmth. "I just play what I feel," she said simply. Her words were humble, yet they carried a quiet confidence that left a lasting impression. The students nodded, impressed not only by her skill but by the way she carried herself. There was no arrogance, only a genuine connection to the music that spoke volumes. Meanwhile, the teachers began to reconsider their approach. They had intended to test her to confirm their doubts, but now they realized that she deserved recognition, not just observation. They quietly discussed how to support her talent, how to encourage it without overwhelming her. Their earlier plan to provoke uncertainty had backfired, replaced by a sense of admiration and responsibility. They saw that she had a rare gift, and they wanted to nurture it, even if they had not anticipated it. During the next few days, the classroom environment subtly shifted. Students who had previously ignored her began to notice her presence more. They observed her quietly, realizing that there was more to her than they had imagined. Some approached her for advice, curious about how she practiced or how she approached her music. Others simply watched, inspired by the quiet determination she had displayed. The girl remained herself, humble and attentive, offering small smiles and gentle words. She did not seek attention or validation, but it found her nonetheless, carried by the undeniable evidence of her talent. The teachers began to offer her more challenging pieces, exercises that would push her skill further. They observed her closely, providing guidance and encouragement where needed, but also giving her space to explore and express her own interpretations. It was a delicate balance, but she thrived in it. The once quiet, unnoticed student was now seen as a leader in her own way, someone whose skill commanded attention not through force or loudness, but through quiet excellence. One afternoon, during a particularly challenging lesson, the teachers asked her to perform a piece she had not prepared fully. It was a test, certainly, but also an opportunity. She approached the piano calmly, her fingers poised, her mind focused. As she began, the room was filled with the same captivating energy that had marked her previous performance. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful, each phrase a small story. The students watched in awe, and the teachers could not hide their astonishment. It was clear that her talent was not a single moment of brilliance, but a consistent ability to convey emotion and skill through music. After the performance, the classroom was filled with quiet admiration. Students whispered excitedly, teachers nodded with approval, and the girl herself felt a gentle sense of accomplishment. She understood that the test, the scrutiny, and even the initial doubts had all contributed to this moment. They had forced her to rise, to trust herself, and to let her talent shine in a way that could not be ignored. It was not about proving others wrong, but about proving to herself that she could meet any challenge with grace and confidence. Over the following weeks, her reputation grew quietly but steadily. Students who had once overlooked her began to respect her not just for her skill, but for the way she handled attention and expectation. Teachers began to consult her on musical matters, recognizing her insight and her ability to connect with the essence of a piece. The girl remained humble, never allowing the recognition to cloud her focus or her love for music. She continued to practice diligently, explore new pieces, and find joy in the process rather than the praise. The transformation in the classroom was subtle but profound. Music, once a routine part of the day, became a shared experience, a source of inspiration for everyone present. The teachers, initially intent on testing her confidence, now found themselves learning from her example. She had shown that talent could be quiet, that courage could be gentle, and that true skill did not need to shout to be recognized. Her first note had shocked everyone, but it was the consistency of her ability and the grace of her character that truly left a lasting impression. By the end of the term, the girl had become a quiet leader, someone who inspired others without demanding attention. Her performances continued to amaze, but it was the way she approached music, with patience, thoughtfulness, and authenticity, that set her apart. The classroom environment had shifted from skepticism and doubt to admiration and respect, all because one student had dared to play from her heart, trusting in the power of her own ability. She had learned an important lesson, that recognition and success come not from trying to impress others, but from trusting oneself and remaining true to one's passion. The teacher's tests, meant to provoke uncertainty, had instead revealed the strength of her character and the depth of her talent. The students, inspired by her example, began to see the value of perseverance, humility, and dedication. And the girl, once quiet and unnoticed, had discovered not just the joy of music, but the quiet power of her own presence and the lasting impact of staying true to herself. The following weeks were filled with a new kind of energy. The girl walked into the music room each day with a quiet confidence, her steps measured, her mind focused. The first note she had played weeks ago still echoed in her mind, not just as a memory but as a turning point. She had learned that talent alone was not enough. It was courage, patience, and the willingness to trust herself that made her music meaningful. Every day, she practiced with intention, letting her fingers explore new melodies, new rhythms, and new ways to express what she felt inside. Her classmates continued to watch her with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Some had tried to strike up conversations about music, asking for tips or insight into how she approached her practice. Others simply observed quietly, taking notes in their minds, inspired by the subtle confidence she exuded. She welcomed their questions when she could answer them, always gentle and encouraging. She had learned that sharing knowledge did not diminish her talent. It strengthened it. Every explanation, every small demonstration, reinforced her understanding and allowed her to connect with others in ways that words alone could not. The teachers, too, recognized her growth. They began to assign her more challenging pieces, encouraging her to explore techniques and styles beyond the basic lessons. They watched her closely, offering guidance when necessary, but largely allowing her space to discover her own interpretations. The previous test, meant to challenge her, had transformed into an ongoing journey of exploration and growth. The girl thrived in this environment, balancing focus and creativity, discipline and emotion. She found joy not only in the music itself but in the process of continual learning and self-improvement. One afternoon, the principal of the school asked to hear her play during a special assembly. The girl felt a familiar flutter in her chest, a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but she did not let it overwhelm her. She approached the piano, her hands poised, her mind calm. As she played, the room filled with the same clear, resonant notes that had once stunned her teachers and classmates. But this time the audience was larger, the stakes higher, and yet she felt no fear. She played not to impress, but to share the music that lived inside her. Every note carried emotion, every pause spoke volumes, and by the time she finished, there was a wave of applause that washed over the room. The recognition she received that day was meaningful, but she did not let it change her. She smiled quietly, acknowledging the praise without letting it define her. She knew that her journey was far from over. There were more melodies to explore, more challenges to face, and more ways to grow. She had discovered that true talent was not about seeking validation, but about connecting with the music, expressing it fully, and letting it resonate with others naturally. In the following weeks, the girl began to participate in school concerts and recitals. Each performance brought new opportunities and challenges. She faced the nerves and the expectations with a calm determination, relying on the lessons she had learned from her first note. Every audience, every stage, became another chance to explore her own abilities and to share the joy of music with others. She remained humble, aware that each performance was a step in a larger journey, not a final destination. Her growth was not just in skill but in confidence, in poise, and in the ability to handle attention and expectation with grace. Her story began to inspire other students as well. Those who had once doubted their own abilities started to see that talent could be nurtured quietly, that persistence and focus mattered more than loud declarations or immediate recognition. The classroom had transformed from a place of skepticism into a community of encouragement and exploration. Students practiced more diligently, not out of fear of comparison, but out of inspiration drawn from witnessing her dedication and subtle mastery. The teachers found themselves learning from her example as well. They realized that teaching was not only about instruction but about recognizing and nurturing potential, even when it appeared quietly at first. They observed how she approached each piece of music with thoughtfulness, patience, and emotion, and they adjusted their guidance to support her journey. It became a mutual process of learning and growth, one that enriched both teacher and student. At home, she continued to practice daily, sometimes late into the night, letting her fingers explore new ideas and melodies. The piano became not just an instrument but a companion, a source of comfort, challenge, and expression. She experimented with compositions of her own, small pieces that reflected her feelings and experiences. Each creation was a reflection of her growing confidence and artistic maturity. She learned to trust her instincts, to embrace mistakes as learning opportunities, and to celebrate small successes along the way. The girl also discovered that music had the power to communicate in ways words could not. She played for friends, family, and even strangers when given the opportunity. Each time, she noticed the effect her music had on others, the way a melody could bring comfort, joy, or even a sense of wonder. It was a profound realization that talent carried responsibility, the responsibility to share and connect with others. She embraced it fully, not as a burden but as a gift. Over time, the girl's reputation continued to grow, not through boastful announcements or attention-seeking behavior, but through consistent dedication and genuine expression. Teachers praised her, classmates admired her, and audiences were moved by her performances. Yet she remained grounded, aware that the journey was ongoing. There would be more tests, more opportunities, more challenges, but she felt ready to face them with the quiet strength she had cultivated. In reflection, she realized that the initial test, the moment when the teachers had intentionally challenged her, had been a turning point. It had revealed not just her skill, but her ability to trust herself, to rise to the occasion, and to let her music speak. She had transformed from a quiet, unnoticed girl into a confident, respected musician, someone who inspired others without needing to demand attention. The experience had taught her that true growth comes from within, from belief, persistence, and the courage to express oneself fully. As the school year progressed, she continued to explore new pieces, to learn from her teachers, and to mentor others in small ways. She found joy not only in her own progress but in seeing others grow, in sharing the beauty of music and the satisfaction of discovery. Her journey had begun with a single note, a test meant to challenge her, and it had grown into a path of self-discovery, confidence, and meaningful connection with the world. In the quiet moments, when she sat at the piano alone, she reflected on how far she had come. Each note she played was a reminder of her journey, of the courage it took to face doubt and fear, and of the joy that came from expressing her true self. She smiled softly, knowing that this was only the beginning. The world was full of possibilities, melodies yet to be discovered, and moments of connection waiting to be shared. She had learned that talent, courage, and humility could create something lasting and beautiful, and she was ready to continue her journey, note by note, with confidence and grace.